Hello, everybody, all of you who have assembled here to listen and discuss on different aspects of empathy. Thanks to you all for your valued participation. I am Meeta here to present the neuroscientific basis on empathy. But before discussing the core of my presentation, I would like to highlight the several issues on empathy. Why empathy is so relevant in today's discussion. But before that, let us start with what is empathy. Miss Kirsten Riddle's recipe for empathy is quite simple. Kindness mixed with compassion plus equal parts open heart and mind. Now, by empathy, we mean sharing someone else's pain, experiencing their vulnerability, and allowing ourselves to not only feel what they are feeling, but also to see things from their perspective. Over the years, science has discovered that when we witness an event that might cause distress to others, it triggers the parts of the brain that deal with the action and experience of feeling emotions. In other words, we feel and act as if it is happening to us. We mirror the experience in our mind and catch the same emotions, which then create a need in us to do something to ease the other person's pain. Some people feel more deeply than others and find it easier to connect with people at this level, but we all have the ability to empathize. The renowned Austrian doctor and psychotherapist Alfred Adler stated, empathy is seeing with the eyes of another, listening with the ears of another, and feeling with the heart of another. Empathy is an enormous concept. Renowned psychologists Daniel Goleman and Paul Ekman have identified three components of empathy. Depending on the type of person we are and the situation, these are emotional or affective empathy, cognitive empathy, and compassionate empathy. Ms. Kirsten Riddle beautifully elaborated these differentiations in her little book of empathy. Affective empathy, also known as emotional empathy. This is all about understanding and sharing what the other person is feeling. For example, we might see someone suffering pain in heart. As we go through the same emotions, we also start feeling pain in heart. Thus, when we experience affective empathy, we sense, feel, and understand at our heart level. Next comes cognitive empathy. This type of empathy is about understanding what is going on in the mind and how a person is thinking. It can help us connect and communicate more effectively with others because we understand what resonates with them of a deeper level. Here, we connect with their mental state and imagine what they're thinking. When we show cognitive empathy, we can easily see things from another person's perspective. Now, the final one is compassionate empathy. This takes empathy to a higher dimension. In this stage, not only do we think and feel what the other person is going through, but we are also moved to take action and alleviate their suffering in whatever way we can. We reach out, connect, and do our best to make the person feel better. Empathy is a unique quality attributed to living beings in the course of evolution. This invaluable quality of sharing is seen in animals as well as different empathy-related experiments. Conducted among rats, monkeys mimicking the same responses as seen among humans. In this context, I am very tempted to mention the names of two dazzling stars possessing compassionate empathy in the history of humanity, Buddha and Mahatma Gandhi. Their lived lives elaborate the epitome of compassionate empathy. Today, this topic, empathy, has become so relevant, it needs to be nurtured among all individuals as this planet, our Mother Earth, needs its manifestation in every nook and corner. Possibilities of varied human cruelty are often identified with different borderline personality disorders, genetics, hormonal imbalances, and also varied cultural roots. Besides, interventions of social media may be one of the main causes today. People are not interacting face to face much anymore. Because of the environmental and climate pollution, the sustainability of this planet is in serious crisis. And if we are not considerate enough for our mutual interests, our coming generations will be facing dire situations. Their sustainability will be highly compromised. We should consciously consider that environmental pollutions causing immense impact on our climate, causing more and more ice melting, increasing sea levels, too much rise of temperature during summer, erratic temperature fluctuations at different places at any point of time, droughts in agricultural fields, multiple areas affected by flood, and often at odd hours, frequent earthquakes, cyclones, bushfires, tornadoes causing famines, forced migration, etc. So will be the state of entire animal and plant kingdom. Presently, it is often noticed that people, being much indifferent to all these consequences, have been much accustomed to self-centeredness, highly concerned about self-interest, self-comforts, and total indifference towards others' needs, others' inconveniences, utter apathy towards nature's ecosystems. Out of ego, greed, and enmity, today's warmongers are fighting with each other countries, killing innocent civilians, children, animals, destroying habitats, producing innumerable refugees who will take their responsibilities. The greedy, rampant political leaders looting human wealth in the name of governing the states without any accountability. In general, the school education system is very much affected, as often the students are involved in violent attacks towards their schoolmates, using deadly weapons brought from home. Now, question arises how they can access to such weapons. Aren't the parents responsible for these incidents? Why so much violence among students? Why they are not at peace? Is our education system jeopardized? These are few examples of today's dire situations where nurturing empathy has become so vital to protect our habitat. And first of all, it should start from school. Our coming generations should be empowered with empathic mindset. Hence, empathy should be introduced in the school curriculum. It is expected that by nurturing empathy, people will be more responsible towards their own duties, be it in the workplace or in the family or towards the environment and the society at large. The humanity can flourish again in a favorable, healthy, balanced environment. A close bonding among people, countries will generate healthy understanding and confidence among themselves, which will be contributory towards further achievements in science, technology, literature, environmental sciences, etc. Some incredible insights by the outstanding scientists on empathy that can help us understand why empathy is so important for humans to progress and thrive. Stephen Hawking said, replace aggression with empathy. One of the most loved cosmologists and physicists on planet Earth said, the human failing I would most like to correct is aggression. It may have had survival advantage in caveman days to get more food, territory, or a partner with whom to reproduce, but now it threatens to destroy us all. Aggression is a human failing. Aggression has outlived its survival value in the modern world, and to get aggressive towards another is to fail miserably in our humanness. He specifically mentioned it is this failure that could trigger a nuclear war and destroy the whole of humanity. Hawking was clear that he would like to see more kindness and understanding in this world. He said, "The quality I most like to magnify is empathy. It brings us together in a peaceful, loving state." V.S. Ramchandran, neuroscientist and the director of the Center for Brain and Cognition at University of California, San Diego, said mirror neurons allow us to empathize with others' pain. He further said, "If I really and truly empathize with your pain, I need to experience it myself. That is what the mirror neurons are doing, allowing me to empathize with your pain." Saying, in effect, that person is experiencing the same agony and excruciating pain as you would if somebody were to poke you with a needle directly. That is the basis of all empathy. Neuroscientific basis of empathy. To start with, we will first discuss the effects of empathy on the normal physiology of human being, and will explore whether empathy enhances human well-being. To find the physiology behind empathy, researchers have shown that hormone oxytocin produced in hypothalamus is involved in human trust, bond formation, generosity, and empathy. Oxytocin levels have been previously linked to empathy. Some studies suggested that increasing oxytocin improves cognitive empathy and helps with social adaptation in patients with autism spectrum disorder, that is ASD. However, low oxytocin level may lead to low empathy. It has been witnessed that the empathy causes the release of oxytocin, which then causes the release of dopamine, that is the lighting up the reward center of the brain, and serotonin, which reduces anxiety. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter in brain which regulates our mood. It is often called our body's natural feel-good chemical. When serotonin is at normal level, we feel more focused, emotionally stable, happier, and calmer. Whereas lower levels of serotonin are associated with depression. The dopaminergic system plays important roles in neuromodulation, such as motor control, motivation, reward, cognitive function, maternal and reproductive behaviors. McGovern Institute team found that in addition to the motor cortex, the remote brain area most affected by dopamine is the insular cortex. This region is critical for many cognitive functions related to perception of the body's internal states, including physical and emotional states. How does dopamine make someone feel happy? Dopamine is known as the feel-good hormone. It gives us a sense of pleasure. It also gives us the motivation to do something when you are feeling pleasure. Dopamine is part of our reward system. This system is designed from an evolutionary standpoint to reward us when we are doing the things we need to do to survive, eat, drink, compete to survive, and reproduce. As humans, our brains are hardwired to seek out behaviors that release dopamine in our reward system. When we are doing something pleasurable, our brain releases a large amount of dopamine. We feel good and seek more of that feeling. Does empathy release endorphins? Research shows that when we use the mirror neuron system to show compassion, our brain releases these endorphins hormones. Not only does the empathic person feels better because the person they're connecting with feels better, they feel good because their brain released endorphins into the body. Hence, these hormonal evidences suggest that empathy has positive effects on our hormones and vice versa. Therefore, through practicing empathy, we are also being benefited. It is indeed a manifestation of an evolutionary process. So more we practice empathy, much gainer we are for ourselves as well as for the good of the entire humanity. An overview on neurological aspects of empathy. Scientists have already discovered a highly specialized group of brain cells in us called mirror neurons. Their role is to learn about things by mimicking, and thus we learn how to speak, eat, or do different activities. It teaches us empathy by reflecting the emotions that we see in others. With the help of mirror neurons, we often mimic body movements like facial expressions, postures, or hand gestures without being consciously aware of them. This mirror neuron system regulates empathy. Any person can feel others' agony, pain with his mirror neuron system through this reflection process. This can bring joy in both the empathic person as well as the subject of empathy. Mirror neurons are very important to mankind as these are the only brain cells we are aware of, which seem specialized to code the actions of other people and also our own actions. These are essential brain cells for social interactions. Without them, we would likely be blind towards any coordination with others in terms of the actions, intentions, and emotions of other people. At the outset, the brain works on an internal reward system. When we do things that our brain considers good for us, like exercise, then the brain releases endorphins, the happiness hormones in our body. Research shows that when we use the mirror neuron system to show compassion, our brain releases these hormones, the endorphins. Not only does the empathic person feel better because the person they are connecting with feels better, they feel good because their brain releases endorphins into the body. Again, it has been witnessed as well that this system may become disrupted if in the past their compassion was met with distrust, fear, or even negative consequences. It might happen in family or in long-term abusive relationship or in an unempathic work environment. A person can learn to deactivate this part of their brain because of the negative consequences for practicing it. The mirror neuron system can be strengthened by nature versus nurture arrangement. Studies show that around 50% of empathy is neurological, while other 50% is cultivated through the environment. A person in a healthy empathic work environment can strengthen this dormant part of the brain. Consistent positive reinforcement is needed. Creating a safe place where people can express themselves is essential. An organization must demonstrate empathy throughout the leadership ranks to cultivate it. Now let us come to the core aspect of our discussion, the neuroscientific basis of empathy. Scientists have identified a group of cells in the brain whose activity could help explain the ability to share another's pain. From the imaging studies of human brains, it revealed a region called anterior cingulate cortex, ACC, which remains active during the experience of pain, which can also become active when observing pain in others. These studies have also revealed that when observing another's pain, this region is more active in people with high levels of empathy and less active with people with psychopathy. Scientist Catherine Paddock elaborated it on April 2019 in Medical News Today. She further stated that, however, these earlier investigations did not clarify the underlying mechanisms or the categorical cells involved in it. In her paper, she elaborated that thereafter, by studying rats, researchers at the Netherlands Institute of Neuroscience, NIN, in Amsterdam, have identified that the ability to feel the pain of others has to do with mirror neurons in the anterior cingulate cortex, ACC. Scientists discovered mirror neurons before also, but they were related to observing movements. In a current biology paper, authors of the new study elaborated that the mirror neurons in rats ACC become active not only when the animal itself is in pain, but also when it observes another rat in pain. The lead author, Christian Kaisers, who is a professor at NIN, states that the most amazing fact is that this all happens in exactly the same brain region in rats as in humans. Professor Kaisers and his team considered their findings as an important milestone in understanding how lack of empathy arises in certain psychiatric conditions. In their study paper, they mentioned two reports from previous investigations, which suggested that some ACC neurons respond to the observation and experience of pain. One was an observation in a single human patient, and another was in a mouse study. On the basis of these findings, that the mirror neurons already feature in the brain's motor system, they decided to test two theories. The first was that there are mirror neurons in the ACC that trigger our own feeling of pain and are reactivated when we see the pain of others. And the second one was that this is the reason why we wince and feel pain while seeing the pain of others. As it is not possible either to map the activity of individual neurons or or to stimulate changes in the ACC in human brain, the researchers then decided to test these theories in rats. One of the reasons why they chose rats as the model was because part of their ACC has a similar cell structure and connectivity to the ACC area that has implications in the pain empathy in humans. Further studies were conducted to witness brain changes while observing others. A series of experiments were conducted in which the scientists measured changes in the brain and behavior of rats, both when the animal received a mild shock and when they then observed the other rat receiving the same unpleasant stimulus. The results showed that the rat's behavior and brain changes in response to seeing other rats in pain were the same as those that occurred when the observer rats experienced the pain themselves. Both these responses involved the same ACC neurons. The researchers then repeated the empathy experiment, but this time they suppressed the activity of ACC neurons that have been active before. When the treated rats observed pain in other rats, they no longer showed the same empathic behavior. Pain is a complex experience that has sensory and emotional components. Many studies of pain tend to use definitions that derive from people's descriptions and behavior patterns in animals. However, to be sure that it is pain and not some other negative experience that is at work in the brain, it is important to take into consideration signals in the neural system. Decoding of pain intensity, same as in self. Professor Kaisers and his team take up this point in their study paper. The scientists have argued that a vicarious response that is specific to pain as opposed to fear, as example, needs to show two features in the brain. The first feature is that the brain response must be selective. The second feature is that the circuit has to have the same way of coding pain in the self as in others. Their results met both of these criteria. They showed that most of the observer rats' ACC mirror neurons did not activate in response to another negative emotion, such as fear. Besides, the observing rats could feel pain intensity in the self from a pattern decoding pain in others. Professor Kaisers concluded that the study sheds light on how lack of empathy might arise in psychopathy and other disorders. He also stated that empathy the ability to feel with the emotions of others is deeply rooted in our evolutions. We share the fundamental mechanisms of empathy with animals like rats, said Professor Kaiser. In Neurobiology of Empathy, published on 22nd November 2015, last modified on 29th March 2020, the author Maja Kochanowska stated that psychology distinguishes between two types of empathy. From the emotional perspective, empathy is the ability to empathize emotional states of other people, but from the cognitive perspective, this is the ability to understand the beliefs, feelings, and intentions of others. Empathy is a complex process which involves at least two paths, bottom up and top down. The path bottom up is based on the so-called mirror neurons and is responsible for the emotional aspect of empathy, while the other path top down is confined to the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for the functioning of the ability to take someone else's perspective, that is the cognitive aspect of empathy. The information processing bottom up. In the path bottom up, mirror neuron system is involved. It works with the principle of mirror. When we see someone who performs a certain movement, the activation of nerve cells in our brain takes place, responsible for such movement. Stimulation of the mirror neurons also occurs when we imagine someone making some movement and if we follow this movement. In most studies using functional magnetic resonance imaging, while observing or imagining the pain of others, underwent strongest activation of the anterior cingulate cortex and anterior insular cortex. In the studies of pain empathy conducted by other methods, there was a significant activation of somatotropin sensory cortex. Information processing top-down. The way of processing top-down information is responsible for the cognitive aspect of empathy, which allows us to imagine and understand what the other person's feelings by accepting my point of view, perceptions, and intentions. When a person is asked to imagine what the intentions, desires, and beliefs has another person, the activation increases mainly in the medial prefrontal cortex, temporoparietal junction, superior temporal sulcus, and pole of the temporal lobe. Medial prefrontal cortex probably takes part in emotional aspect of emotions. Activation of this part of brain occurs not only when subjects are asked to imagine what someone thinks about a topic, but also what he feels. In people suffering from various types of autism, this area is not activated. And due to this reason, they are unable to empathize and recognize emotions in others. People with damaged prefrontal cortex and children in whom it is still immature are unable to take someone else's perspective and have tendency to emotional contagion, that is infecting children crying, which is the outcome of the activity of mirror neuron system. Thank you everyone for listening to the connection between neuroscience and empathy. To deepen the concept further, there are plenty of resources, research material online. So keep reading and sharing. If you want to clarify further, you can access the references by contacting conference convener. Thank you.